Hello, all the lovely sweet children out there. Um, I've written another story, another bedtime story for you all, and I think I'm going to name this story Nola, the Invisible Child. So here is the story of Nola, the Invisible Child. There was once an extraordinary child. Her name was Nola. She was an orphan from birth. But she lived with her mean Auntie Birdwhistle in an isolated, abandoned castle that had a creaky staircase. Nola's mean auntie would lock her up in her room. Nola would feel all alone. A few yards away was a beautiful cottage where a lovely family lived with a mum, dad, brother and sister. They were the Champion family. The brother called Earl and the sister was called Arena. It was most unusual, but Earl and Arena enjoyed school and were looking forward to their new school. On the way, they passed Miss Birdwhistle's castle. They heard very strange but beautiful music come from the castle. Aaron puzzled. I wonder what that can be. Earl smiled. I hear the same music. It is so beautiful, yet played by an instrument that nobody has ever heard of before. Earl looked up into the castle's window. A very pretty little girl smiled down to him. Her features on her face were sweet and perfect. She had a big blue greeny eyes and long curly red hair. She only looked about 5 or 6 years old, still only a very small child. Earl smiled back at her. Earl and Arena then walked to school together. They were met by Mr. Broomstick at their school. He was very scary and had a pet lizard. The lizard sat on his school desk with him and on his shoulder everywhere he went. When the children were naughty, he would sit a child on the swing, then push it so hard that the child would spin in the air, then come down again feeling dizzy. If they were really naughty, he would put them in the dark cellar where there were rumours of ghosts. Mr. Broomstick looked at Earl and Arena and grinned. I see you are new, and you are a second late. I am not going to punish you, however. It is much more fun to pick on Roger, for I don't like kids with red hair. He put poor Roger on the school swing and span him high and around. Poor Roger came back down. Earl and Arena ran up to Roger and helped him up. Earl asked, Are you okay? Roger said, I will be okay. Arena asked, Will you tell your parents? Roger replied, My sister Roxy and I don't have any parents. We were orphans since we were only 1 and 2. We don't remember who they are, and we live in a children's home. How old are you? Asked Arena. Roger replied, 7, and Roxy is 8. Earl smiled. Same with us. I am 7 and my sister is 8 years old. Arena asked, We will all be in the same class, and what is our teacher like? Roxy, Roger's sisters, came out from her hiding behind the tree smiling. Earl smiled. You are the girl I smiled to in the castle, aren't you? But Roxy just smiled. I don't know what you're talking about. But my name is Roxy, and the boy you are talking to is my brother, Roger. Earl smiled. And we are Earl and Arena. Mr. Broomstick came from behind. Stop standing around talking, kids. Get in class and learn. His lizard hissed. It startled the children, and they went into their classrooms. Their teacher, Mr. Eggleton, was completely different. He was kind and tender-hearted. He was a good teacher, but also a great friend to each of the children. Mr. Broomstick came in the classroom. A little boy had been half an hour late to class. Mr. Broomstick grabbed his arm and dragged him and put him into the cellar. Mr. Eggleton spoke up. "Is that really necessary?" Mr. Broomstick cackled. "You don't tell me what to do." Later on, when Mr. Broomstick was occupied, Mr. Eggleton went and got the little boy out of the dark, creepy cellar. The poor boy was as white as a sheet with fright. Mr. Eggleton carried him back to class. He sat him down on the sofa and stayed with him the whole time to reassure him, giving him hot chocolate and biscuits and just listening to him. He even gave him, the little boy, his last bit of favourite candy. Lesson time came around and Mr. Broomstick came in their classroom. All the children were suddenly sitting up straight and not talking. Mr. Broomstick was really angry with Mr. Eggleton for being nice to the boy. Then he threw a dart at him. Mr. Eggleton moved out of the way and it hit the door. The dart hit the door. All of the children gasped in shock. Mr. Broomstick bellowed, "Nobody messes with me, not even Mr. Eggleton. Understand, Mr. Eggleton?" Mr. Eggleton nodded his head in shock. Then Mr. Broomstick left the room again. Irina said, "Wow, he's a piece of work." Mr. Eggleton sighed. "We are going to have to be really careful from now on." And all the children agreed. However, Mr. Eggleton still intended to care and protect the children the best way he could. Meanwhile, up in the castle, Nola played with her unusual instrument. It was an instrument not seen with human eyes. It seemed to be a gift from heaven. It was in the shape of a beautiful star. A person would blow into it, and bubbles and music would come out of it. It also had strings which played the chords. Miss Birdwhistle snapped at her. "Stop playing that nasty tune." However, Mr. and Mrs. Champion were out in the garden. Mr. Champion said, "What a beautiful melody." Mr. Champion Mrs. Champion replied, "Yes, my dear, it sure is the most lovely melody that I have ever heard. But I have no clue what instrument is playing that." Mr. Champion smiled. "It is a mystery, my dear." Then they heard shouting. Irina and Al also heard shouting coming from the castle as they walked home from school. Irina wondered, "Wonder who that witch is shouting at." Al replied, I think it's an ugly witch that must live in that castle. But I also saw a girl in the window, and she was beautiful." Irina replied, "That cannot be true. That girl lives in that castle, for we only hear a witch's voice, and that witch is making that music. However, it's a mystery. Why does a witch make beautiful music?" Earl thought about it for a few seconds, scratching his head. Maybe the witch wants to appear to be beautiful, so she shapes herself into being a little girl and plays that music, but in secret she is casting spells. If that is true, I will no longer smile back at the little girl in the window." Irina replied, "That is a wise decision." In the meantime, Auntie Birdwhistle's shouted and taunts got louder and louder. "You useless child! I wish you did not have to stay here with me." Auntie Birdwhistle then snatched Nola's instrument from out of her hands, then threw it all the way down the spiral staircase. At the bottom, it smashed into millions of pieces. Nola ran into her room. She looked out of her window. Tears ran down her face. Earl looked up. He saw the girl of the castle window and her face crying a million crystal tears. He looked away, thinking, "Oh dear," but he did not know what to do. The shouts and taunts continued. Then the extraordinary happened. Bit by bit, of Nola's body was starting to disappear. Yes, she was becoming invisible. Now Nola could plan her escape. She walked past her auntie down the spiral staircase, then opened the door and walked out. That evening Nola tried to find shelter by sheltering under some bushes. She picked some fruit off the trees to eat. Elder and Arena went outside to play. They started to play hide and seek in the bushes. Suddenly Nola spoke to them. "Hi," she said. "Who said that?" said Arena. "Me," said Nola. "I am an invisible girl." Earl asked, "Where are you? Where are you? And how did you become invisible?" Nola explained, "I was cursed by my auntie as a baby. In fact, she is no blood auntie of mine. She just grabbed me away from my brother and sister when I was born. My mum went to heaven when giving birth to me. My dad went to heaven shortly afterwards from a broken heart. She cast a spell on me that if I feel sad and unloved, that I would eventually turn invisible. The only way to break that curse would be to find an adult who would love me as their own child. I have always been unhappy, but when she broke my star guitar, that is what brought me to despair. My star guitar is the only thing that I have left from my mum. There was only one star guitar left in the whole world." Arena sighed. "She sounds like an evil witch. But, however, you cannot stay out here alone. Come inside with us." Arena and Earl took Nola inside. They told their parents all about Nola and what had happened to her, and about the curse and how it would be undone. How the curse would be undone. Mr. and Mrs. Champion welcomed Nola into their home and agreed to take care of her until she could find someone to give her a permanent home. Meanwhile, Miss Birdwhistle, the witch, was looking for Nola. She knocked on Mr. and Mrs. Champion's door. Mrs. Champion answered the door. She cackled, Miss Birdwhistle crackled. "Has any of you seen my niece?" Miss Champion said. "No, we have not." "But you are welcome to look for her." Miss Birdwhistle looked around and high and low the house and said, "I do not see her, but I bet she's here. I know. I cast a spell to make her invisible, but I will smell her if she's here." Miss Champion felt nervous as Miss Birdwhistle smelt the air high and low. She then left again, saying, "Strange, I don't smell her." Once she had left, Nola sighed a breath of relief. What Miss Birdwhistle did not realise was that if Nola poured some rose-smelling perfume on herself, that Miss Birdwhistle would not be able to smell Nola. Nola and Arena had been in Miss Champion's bedroom, putting perfume on Nola. Nola said, "Thank you. I am sorry for pouring your perfume on myself, but I panicked." Mrs. Champion smiled. "It is okay, my dear. But if you need or want something, you need to ask me first in the future. I will gladly give it to you." Earl said, "Mum, you are not perfect. You lied. You told Miss Birdwhistle that you did not see Nola." Mrs. Champion smiled. "Actually, I did not lie. It is true. We cannot see Nola. However, she never asked if we knew where she was." Earl smiled. "That is true, Mum." Mrs. Champion took out a ribbon in her handbag. "Do you like ribbons?" asked Mrs. Champion to Nola. Nola said yes. She told Nola to wear it so that they would know where she was. Mrs. Champion smiled. "I bet you are a very pretty girl." That night the family sang around the piano. Nola had a beautiful singing voice. The next day after school, Mr. Eggleton paid the Champion family a visit Erin and Earl were exceptionally intelligent and gifted children. They invited him for a meal after. Nola sat next to Mr. Eggleton. He jumped with fright to see the knife and fork being lifted up and the pasta and vegetables disappearing into thin air. With a bow on top hovering over, Mrs. Champion smiled. Do not be afraid. This is Nola. She is an invisible child. Mr. Eggleton quizzed, but how? Mrs. Champion then explained to him all about Nola, her life, and her auntie's curse. His heart immediately went out to the poor child, but then Nola spoke up. She was very intelligent and could add up and times numbers together that not even the most intelligent adult could do. Mr. Eggleton gasped, Good grief, not even I can do those sums by heart. She needs to be in school. Nola said, I would love to go to school. Mrs. Champion replied, We would love to send her, but her being invisible would only scare the other children. Mr. Eggleton nodded his head. You are right. However, I will come around every evening and give her private lessons. Nola, Erin, and Arena were very excited and clapped their hands, and they jumped up and down. So Mr. Eggleton kept his promise. Evening after evening he came to teach Nola. Days turned into months, until a whole year had passed by. Mr. Eggleton had become very fond of Nola, and Nola of him. Nola just kept becoming clever and more clever. Arena and Earl had grown to love her like a sister. However, Mr. and Mrs. Champion were only going to keep her temporarily. Earl and Arena had also been bringing their two best friends home, Roger and Roxy, every night to play with them. Nola had also grown very close to them and felt a strange but beautiful connection to them. They would go and collect fruit together. Nola put the bow in her hair at times that she wanted others to see her. She still had to be careful living next door to her wicked auntie. One day the four children got home from their school. They had reached breaking point with their wicked headmaster, Mr. Broomstick. He had been putting kids on the swings and making them spin hard more than ever and putting kids down the cellar more than ever. So Mr. Eggleton came up with a plan. Mr. and Mrs. Champion agreed to the plan. Nola went to school wearing her bow with Mr. Eggleton, Earl, Arena, Roger, and Roxy. At first the other children were scared to see a floating bow, but Mr. Eggleton calmed them down and said, Do not be afraid. This is Nola. She is an invisible child. She is not a ghost. She will not hurt you. She is a lovely girl who's come to help us. One girl smiled, walked over to her, and gave her a lolly. Thanks, said Nola. The lolly seemed to disappear into thin air. Then Mr. Broomstick turned up. Nola quickly took her ribbon out of her hair so she was completely invisible to Mr. Broomstick. Mr. Broomstick evilly cackled with his lizard on his shoulder. Nola suddenly picked the lizard up and span him in her arm. Mr. Broomstick was shocked. Go away, ghost! Leave my lizard alone! He quivered. Nola then wrote on a piece of paper, saying, I am a spirit sent to punish you for the cruel way you treated the children of this school. And then she stuck it right up in his face. Mr. Broomstick quivered. I am so sorry. Please forgive me. She then wrote, I will forgive you only if you go down in the deep dark cellar alone. Oh, Mr. Broomstick quivered. Okay, I will. And he was so in fear, all the other children laughed. Mr. Broomstick locked himself in the cellar. He was there for a very long time until Nola opened the cellar. The salad caused an echo which made her sound even more scary. She put on a deep and scary voice and commanded, "You had better leave the school and never return." Mr. Broomstick climbed out of the cellar and quivered. "Oh, I will, and I'm never coming back to this school again." All the children cheered as Mr. Broomstick left and never came back ever again. Mr. Eggleton smiled. Nola put her bow back in her hair, and like a daddy hugs his baby girl, was the same way Mr. Eggleton hugged Nola. Mr. and Mrs. Champion had arrived at the school to pick up all 5 children when they heard about what had happened. Mrs. Champion said, "Come home now, children." But Mr. Eggleton suggested, "How about if Nola comes home with me?" Mrs. Champion asked, "What do you mean?" Mr. Eggleton smiled. "I have grown to love Nola like my very own daughter, even though I have never seen her before. I have been discussing this with my wife in depth, and we both decided that we would love to adopt Nola, as we have been wanting children for many years." Nola's heart burst with sunlight inside her, and then she never had felt so happy. And then something really wonderful happened. The happiness inside of her heart made her visible again, and she just to be shown such unconditional love that because she was shown such unconditional love that she had never seen in her life before, and that who never that she had never seen, that he loved, but he loved her anyway, even though he had never seen her. She jumped into Mr. Eggleton's arms and burst, "I love you, Daddy." Mr. Eggleton smiled. "I love you too, kiddo." Mrs. Champion said, "What a pretty little girl you are. We shall miss you dearly, but we are happy that she will be going to a good home." Mr. and Mrs. Eggleton then drove to the Champion's house. On their way, they noticed Miss Birdwhistle being taken away by the police. She had a past record of kidnapping children. The police had finally caught up with her, and she had finally lost her powers to be able to ever curse again when Nola broke the curse over herself. All the children that Miss Birdwhistle kidnapped had now been found and sent back to their own families, and she went to prison forever and was never allowed to come out again. Just like she did to the children, now it was her turn to know how it felt like to be locked up. While the children said when the children said their final farewells to each other, Nola found a picture of her mum in her purse. Roxy also had a picture of her mum in her purse. They showed the picture to each other. They both had a picture. They both had the same picture of the same woman. Yes, indeed, Nola, Roxy, and Roger were siblings. They felt so much joy. Nola and Roxy just hugged each other so close, and they were so happy to find each other again. Not only did Nola find a new mum and dad, but now she had siblings also. A whole new family for her. Mr. and Mrs. Eggleton also agreed to adopt Roxy and Roger. They sold their old house and moved into the castle next door to the Champion family. They were now all together. The Eggletons became a very happy family. They were the children were loved like they were their very own children, their very own flesh and blood children. The Champion children remained best friends with the Eggleton children, who played every day together. They walked to school with each other every day together, and Mr. and Mrs. Champion became best friends with Mr. and Mrs. Eggleton. Mr. Champion had become the new headmaster of the school, and Miss Eggleton became their new teacher. All of the Eggleton children were given a new star guitar, each from their guardian angels above. They would play them every night And Mr. and Mrs. Eggleton really loved to hear them play, and they cheered them and encouraged them all the time, and they remained happily ever after. And that's the end of the story. And I hope you all enjoyed it and was blessed by that. And God bless you. Bye for now.